morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alex Paul from InvestorStream, and I'll be your host today. Presenting for you today is Pancontinental Energy Chief Executive Officer Ian Smith, who will give a brief introduction before a Q&A session. Now, we have been inundated with questions, which is greatly appreciated. However, if you wish to ask a question live on the webinar, simply raise your virtual hand and I'll endeavour to accommodate you. We will attempt to get through as many questions as time permits, and a recording of the session will be posted on the company's website and social media platforms later today. Ian, I'll throw it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Alex, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We don't have a presentation for this session. I'll have a few backup slides that we may refer to depending on the nature of the questions. Why are we holding this session? Well, you've all seen a bit of weakness in the stock price over the last couple of weeks on a fair bit of volume. We see this partially as due to general market conditions, but also we have been aware of a number of reasonably large sellers who have sold out for various reasons. We believe that selling is done now. Obviously, we're in a period of relatively light news flow, and I think this has caused a bit of consternation for shareholders, resulting in the company receiving a large number of inquiries, direct email inquiries or via the corporate website over the last couple of weeks. And we felt that this was a good opportunity to manage those queries in a very open and transparent way, so that everybody sort of sees where the company's at and where we're going. So thanks for joining. With that, Alex, I'll hand over to you to get things started.
Thanks, Ian. Firstly, what are the results from the... but before I get into the Q&A, I just want to get into a bit of a reminder that if you want to participate in the live Q&A, simply raise your virtual hand. I will call out your name and allow you to take yourself off mute. Please make your question brief and please refrain from any inflammatory or offensive language. And I may have to just reclaim hosting privileges off you for the time being while I just filter through the attendees, if you don't mind. If you want to refer to your presentation, just let me know. Now, I'll start on some of the submitted questions first. Firstly, what are the results from the 3D so far? And if Woodside decide not to enter into the farm-in, what is PCL's plan B?
Good question. Where are we at with the interpretation? I guess, first of all, I would say, as a company stated before, this is the interpretation of the 3D with a very, very large data set. We're looking for features, leads, and prospects that are really quite subtle in nature due to the nature of the petroleum geology. And that demands that the interpretation requires quite an extensive period of time. We're not simply mapping horizons and looking for bumps as you would in many parts of the world. So that the nature of the play demands a really intensive look at the seismic. We need to get a lot more from the seismic than you normally would in terms of trying to understand what some of the rock properties or fluid properties might be from the seismic signatures. But where are we at thus far? We've been interpreting the data, the final pre-stack depth migration data since end of February. We've identified a variety of play types that exist within the survey area and within PEL 87 more broadly. There are, I think, 7 Cretaceous play types. We're focused on the Cretaceous. There are other play types above that within the Tertiary, but our main focus is on the Cretaceous. Why is that? Well, all the major discoveries that have been made on trend to the south are within the Cretaceous. So that's where our focus is. More recently, we've focused in on 2 specific play types. Those are a number of leads that we see within the Saturn complex, and also beneath that at the Aptian-Birimian level, we're seeing some really very interesting features that we think potentially could be analogues of Total's Venus discovery, where we're looking at a basin floor fan depositional setting. So that's where we're at right now. Those 2 particular plays are being fed into an AVO analysis piece of work, which we've contracted to a specialist consultancy based out of Adelaide. That work's underway at the moment. Why are we doing AVO? Well, it appears from what we know, from what's reported, that all, or the majority, if not all, of the discoveries made on trend thus far within the Namibian Orange Basin have AVO support. So they have AVO anomalies associated with them. So naturally, ourselves and Woodside will be looking for AVO anomalies which are coincident with structural or stratigraphic features that may today represent only leads, but which with that further AVO work could potentially be upgraded to prospect status. So I think that probably answers the first part of the question. Second part was, what are we going to do if Woodside elects not to farm in? Well, Woodside's doing its own technical work. We're doing our own technical work. We do from time to time have workshops where we share the status of where we're at and share ideas. So it's quite collaborative. We have to do our own work because there is some potential that Woodside may, for whatever reason, decide not to farm in, and then obviously we have a well to drill next year. We need to find an alternate funding partner, an alternate farminee. So as a contingency, we're doing the work that we need to do so that we can go out and talk to other partners should that become necessary. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Ian. So if Woodside were to commit to a farming today, would this neutralise requirement for 3D licence, and how would it differ to formally obtaining the licence?
The simple answer is yes, it would. If Woodside elected to exercise the option and farm in, they would then become a joint venture partner. As a joint venture partner, they would have the rights to the seismic data that they've acquired. Didn't quite catch the second part of that question, though, Alex.
And how would it differ to formally obtaining the license?
Okay. I guess I probably answered that. As a JV participant, they're entitled to the data. So yeah, that requirement would go away.
Thanks, Ian. So are partners expected to be present during conferences this month? And what are the odds that farming commitment or the permit could also be invoked during?
Firstly, yes, there's a Namibian oil and gas conference in a couple of weeks' time in Windhoek. I think it's the 20th to 22nd of August. I'll be heading over there, and Woodside is one of the many sponsors of the conference. I believe they will have a number of representatives at the conference. Our other JV partners are Namor, who obviously will be there, and also Custos, who I would expect to be present. The second part of the question was around our expectations. Could you repeat that part, Alex?
Yeah, sure. So what are the odds that farming commitment or permit could also be invoked during?
Oh, look, anything could happen. I know that conferences come around and there can be a bit of speculation. There might be a big announcement at conferences. That does happen from time to time. And I'm not sure that major companies like Woodside necessarily pin their timelines for concluding deals and making announcements necessarily around conferences. But anything could happen.
Thanks, Ian. Just a reminder for everyone on the call that if you do want to ask a question live to Ian, just put your hand up virtually and I'll get to you as soon as I can. Now, Ian, what's PCL's interpretation when observing detached fan that you mentioned in the quarterly? Is this seen as a potential oil trap?
Yes, it is. So that detached fan was from an image which we put out in the last quarterly. In fact, you might be able to, Alex, jump down a few slides. We can bring up that image. Are you able to do that? Well, maybe it seems I've got control. So this was the image. This is a 3D perspective view of a slice through the 3D survey. This is the entire, you can see the cursor, the entire 3D survey area. We have a 3D seismic line cutting through that as a section. This is the Aptian baremium level that we were talking about, where we're seeing amplitudes and AVO anomalies that are potentially analogs to an analogous play to what we think Total's Venus discovery represents. So if we look at these images to the right here, we're looking at channel and turbidite fan systems. Here's an example to the bottom right. of an illuminated system, seismic amplitude supported in the Walvis Basin, I believe. And here we have fans here which appear to be attached to the channel feeder systems. We have one over to the north, which appears to be detached from its feeder system. It doesn't exhibit quite such bright amplitudes. It is going to be subject to the AVO study that we're doing. Do we regard that as a lead? Yes, certainly. Regardless of whether the fan is attached or detached, we think that's a good place to go looking for high quality reservoir sands, and it certainly represents a lead as of today.
Thanks, Ian. Unfortunately, we weren't able to actually see your presentation on the screen, but that's okay. We do have someone who's got their hand up. I'd like to allow Robert Ross to talk. Robert, the floor is yours. Once you're ready to speak.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm so confused. As in, I've read obviously everything that's ever been published about what's happening at the moment, but I don't understand why Woodside, if they've paid the $35-40 million or whatever for the seismic, why, given the opportunities that are happening in the basin at the moment, why they're not all over this? Why would they not take the opportunity to go before the license comes out unless they've found something they don't like in it?
They may well make a decision and move before the license is finalised. I hope we can get the license finalised really quite soon. And we'll get onto that, no doubt, in subsequent questions. We only received...
It just feels like there's not a lot of information coming out, and that's my point. As in, I mean, I've been a very patient holder, increasing my, holding in the company, and I feel like there's very little information coming out that would give me some sort of, support in my reasoning for buying the shares. If there's not a lot of news flow, it obviously creates a lot of doubt in holders. I mean, you could obviously understand that.
Certainly. We received the final very large pre-stat depth migration data set end of February. It's not that long ago in the scheme of things. If you allow me, it's a very large data set. We're chasing very subtle features. It's not a case of just mapping a bunch of horizons and creating some structure maps. We have the AVO.
Agreed, and I want to allow you, but the thing is, you also promised us a lot of results that haven't actually happened. As in, you told us you'd update us as you could, and I don't believe for a minute there that there haven't been opportunities where you could have.
If I could explain, we promised to provide interim updates on the various play types as and when they mature. We're not at a stage yet where I can sit in front of a screen and see a map that shows a variety of prospects that we can release to the market. We provided what limited information we are able to. We've gone through the stage of early stage high-level look to 7 Cretaceous play types to now we're focusing on 2. We really can't provide any more detail than that. If the company were to provide more detail right now, for example, put out a lead map that shows the areas and potential thicknesses and extent of some of the leads we're looking at, some of those leads won't make it to the final stage of being upgraded to prospects, and it could be quite misleading for shareholders. So we don't want to come out with anything now where we might have to backtrack down the line. In parallel to that, Woodside's doing its own work. We have broad consensus with them in terms of what we're seeing in the data, but there will inevitably be differences of opinion. If you give the same data set to 10 geos, you'll get 10 slightly different views on things. We need to make sure that when we do provide that real detail around not so much leads, but prospects, and certainly when it gets to the stage of characterizing those prospects with prospective resources and geological chances of success, that needs to be corroborated with Woodside. If Pancon came out tomorrow and said, we have this lead, it's fantastic, it's this big, we really love it, and then Woodside were to exercise the option, farm in and turn around and say that they're going to drill something else, then I don't think that would be well received by
yeah.
So
I totally agree. I guess the only thing that frustrates me, Ian, is like at the end of the day, I mean, I have a huge amount of support with this company. I mean, I think it's amazing that I'm a part of it, being in this drill site. The only thing is that you're the only one that gets paid out of this. I mean, all my hopes are resting on what you provide me, and I just wish it was a little bit better at this stage, and that's all I could say. I mean, I take my hat off to you. You've got a huge job and responsibility in front of you. I just wish you could give us a little bit more confidence in any way you could going forward, please.
Yeah, that's understood, and I've had that very similar feedback quite a few times over the last couple of weeks. Running a junior resources company, particularly oil and gas, you know, the CEO or MD, you want to be putting out news every week if you can. That's one of the enjoyable parts of the job, is getting that news out there and hopefully getting his shareholders and the market excited. And it is frustrating for everybody that we're in this period where we just need to be cautious and responsible around what we do put out to market. But totally understand where you're coming from. I would just
totally. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. We go back to some of our pre-written questions. Now, during the webinar, our most recent webinar, Ian, you gave a scenario using 40 billion barrels. Was this just an example, or is there a possibility that this could be the case?
As I recall, the point I was trying to make there was that one of the things you need to consider when you're looking at the size of a prospective feature, so a prospect, is not just the size of the trap. And the point I was trying to make there is you might have a very large structural stratigraphic trap. And I think off the top of my head, I came out with over 40 billion barrels. And the point I was trying to make, that's a huge number. The point I was trying to make there was there's no point saying you've got a 40 billion barrel prospect, or 10 billion or 20 billion, if you haven't got a source kitchen and what they call a hydrocarbon budget. So a source kitchen in a catchment area that feeds into that prospect that can support those figures. You might have a structure that could accommodate 40 billion barrels, but your hydrocarbon budget might only be 20 million barrels. So it's just one of those things we need to consider. And I think I was using the example, because we were talking specifically, I believe, about basin modeling. It's not just looking locally at the prospect. You need to look more broadly within the basin as to where the hydrocarbons are going to come from, where they're cooked, and how they're going to migrate into your structure. So that number was not intended to give any indication as to the size of any particular lead that we have on the books at the moment.
Thanks, Ian. So what are the company's major risks in relation to the success of the exploration wells?
Yeah, I'm assuming that the question relates to geological risks. When companies such as ourselves and Woodside and everyone looks at an individual prospect, you break it down. There are a variety of things you need to have in place to go right for you to have a hydrocarbon accumulation, particularly commercial hydrocarbon accumulation. You need a reservoir. You need a trap. That reservoir needs to be with a trap. It could be stratigraphic or structural. You need to have something to seal that trap, typically a top seal, but could also be lateral. You need to have a hydrocarbon source somewhere within the vicinity of the prospect. So that needs to be high organic content shales that have been buried to sufficient depth to reach a temperature such that they're cooked, and they release hydrocarbons, either oil or gas or both, condensate. And those hydrocarbons need to have the path to migrate from the source kitchen into the reservoir. Now, typically, companies will assign a geological chance of success to any prospects. We certainly will do when we release final prospects. It's a requirement of the ASX. Whenever we talk about prospective resources, we need to also state what the geological chance of success is. That geological chance of success is a combination of a probability which is assigned to all of those various contributing factors. Now, typically, for any given prospect, you might have a particular factor which you see as the key risk, and that might be reservoir. Okay, that's the number one risk. That's the thing that's the potentially the biggest problem. Or it might be migration. You might have a difficult migration route from the source kitchen into the reservoir. With where we're at right now, I don't really see any particular key risk that stands out. Of course, there are risks associated with everything. Right now, with the AVO work yet to be completed, what we're looking for really is reservoir. We've seen indications that we think look pretty good. Certainly based on a couple of the images that we put out in the recent quarterly. It would be hard really to say, right now there's a standout factor that really has a key geological risk. I think we'll have a better understanding of that as the work matures.
Thanks, Ian. So is there a maximum time period the MME has to review and either approve or reject a 3D seismic license application?
No, there's not. And we're in a little bit of a unique situation here. The seismic license, what it is a relatively simple document. It actually needs to be approved by Namor. Namor is the owner and custodian of all geological geophysical data required within Namibia. Namor is also a joint venture partner, obviously. But in their role as regulator, they need to approve Woodside to have a license to use that data in the event that they or to even have continued access to that data, not ownership, but access, in the event that they elect not to farm in. And as we mentioned before, if and when Woodside exercises the option and farms in, this whole question of the seismic license just goes away. So it's a fairly unique situation. I don't know if it's Namor has been, and the ministry has been requested to do something like this before. I suspect not. And it's all because Woodside has invested significant funds in the project without actually yet going on title as a JV participant. So it is a fairly unique situation. Woodside's invested over 35 million US in this survey, so you can understand why they would hope to have ongoing access to that data. But there isn't a prescriptive process under which this license can be issued. There is a frustrating delay, but we are seeing some movement over the past week, and hopefully we can get this thing finalized really quite soon.
So Ian, based on the assessment of the 3D seismic data to date, has the forecast gross resource size increased or decreased?
That's one I'm afraid that I shouldn't comment. It'd be irresponsible to comment on that. Obviously, the company put out prospective resources years ago, probably 2019 maybe, or 20, based on 2D seismic data that was legacy data that the company had access to at the time. If I was to say that's more or less, that would be irresponsible. But I'd be leading. It'd be a leading answer. So I think there's work that's going on. We're really encouraged by what we see. I mean, the slide in the image in the quarterly where you can see these fan sands, and if you were to consider the potential area of those relative to the entire 3D area, which is shown within that image, I mean, we're looking at potentially quite very significant features. So I think I probably should leave it at that.
Thanks, Ian. Now, just a reminder, everyone, if you want to jump on and ask a question live to Ian, please raise your virtual hand. Now, have any prospective reservoirs been identified outside the Saturn turbidite within the PEL 87 licence area?
Yes, they have. Obviously, when Pancon first came into the permit, the focus was entirely on Saturn. So Saturn is a very, very large area extensive and thick feature. We don't regard Saturn itself as a single prospect. It's a big wedge of sediment that stands out. It stands out on the 2D, it stands out on the 3D like a sore thumb. We believe it's a turbidite-related feature, therefore a great area to go looking for good quality reservoir sands. And we see various AVO anomalies within Saturn that are really quite enticing, and we've got more work to do there. Do we see prospectivity outside of Saturn? Yes, we do. I think that was identified. Some of it was identified based on the 2D earlier, so some features in the Cenomanian, which the company called Cenomanian Brights. And now we have the 3D, we have that much more in-depth view of the subsurface that, as we've mentioned, we see probably 7 Cretaceous play types. So only one of those is within Saturn, these intra-Saturn leads that we're focused on. So there are 6 plays out external to Saturn. And then there are plays up in the tertiary, which are not really our focus at the moment. So there's plenty of potential outside of Saturn. It's not just about Saturn for the company.
And has Woodside provided any feedback on the resource size or quality based on their independent assessment?
Not at this stage, no. Obviously, they're doing their work. They're doing their AVO work. They're probably my sense is they're probably nearing completion of that. But we haven't yet had a workshop where we've shared sort of leads and areas and thicknesses to sort of give you prospects and prospective resources. That'll be coming. And the same for the geological chance of success. Those two things tend to go hand in hand: size of prospects and the chance of success. Those are the two things that will really feed into the Woodside's decision making process.
Is the MME license renewal delayed in any way?
I guess we've touched on that. It's taking longer than we anticipated. It's a fairly unique situation. We would like to have had it done by now. It's not MMEs. It is Namor is part of the process. So it's hard to say it's a delay because there's no prescribed time frame. But other than to say, look, we would love to have this. It's become quite a focus for investors. It would be great just to have that tucked away and done. Hopefully not too long. We're seeing some progress.
Thanks, Ian. Shane Daru has put his hand up, and Shane, you take yourself off mute, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ian, again for your time. I suppose just as you said, the focus for the license is a bit of an issue for the shareholders and understanding of that. So in essence, effectively, it's a moot point really in regards to that license, because if Woodside agree to take up the option and farm in, they have access to that information and by rights by being a joint venture. So it's a moot point. The only thing that's, I suppose, sitting in the shareholders' mind from my point of view is the long stop date. Now that only kicks in once that's approved. So that's the issue with shareholders. But so how do you see those two timeframes working against each other? Obviously, it gives 180 days, I think, from memory, for once that's approved, when they must decide to opt in.
Yep.
Or other alternative is they just call you up tomorrow and say, "Hey, we're in," and they have access to that data. So what's your view on those two scenarios from your perspective?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as I say, we'd love to have had that license in place, and the clock started ticking on that 180 days window. Woodside could, census is probably getting fairly well progressed in their technical work, and that may lead to an internal recommendation, but we don't have detail on that. They can't share that kind of level of detail with us in our regular calls. Not at this stage, anyway. If they were to, in the next month or two, reach the decision that they're in, then I don't see why they would delay. I think they would just, once they've made the decision, there's no point sitting around. The issue is more around if they decide they're a bit cold on the prospect or a bit lukewarm. Having that 180 days means that, right now we're probably looking at expiring earliest in February of next year. However, I would say that Pancon will be prepared. And we always have to think about contingencies. And, while we're waiting for Woodside to do its work, the one thing we can do is make sure that we're prepared that should we need to go and find another partner to fund a well, which I'm certainly hoping is not, or necessarily expecting is the case, we need to have all our ducks in a row in terms of the technical work done so that we can go and speak to, the obvious candidates who are already in the basin and a number of majors who are not yet in the basin who want to. So there will come a time during this half of the year where if Woodside hasn't moved, then Pancon will quietly go about making inquiries just as a contingency.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose it's the other concern is because of the delays of the long stop date and all that sort of stuff. Is realistically, then you've got to organise the other stuff. You've got to organise a drill, or multiple drills. You've got to organise the equipment. All that other planning in place takes time. It's not as though you've got drill rigs just sitting there, waiting to go. Weather is obviously taken into account. So all that then delays it. So we were, I suppose, anticipating that probably first quarter of 25, we were looking at, a possible drill. But, as time goes on, it's looking later and later in 25.
Potentially, certainly if we need to, Woodside have not shared with me where they're at in terms of their discussions with rig contractors or other operators who, there are rigs coming back into the basin in the latter half of this calendar year. I'm sure there will be discussions going on. Woodside in a position to kind of share that level of detail with us at the right now. I'm still hopeful for certainly the first half of next calendar year. But yes, we have to acknowledge there is a possibility that it might slip back a bit, Shane.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it. Thanks, Ty.
Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Ian. We also have Robert Ross again, who's got his hand up. Robert, you're on. Take yourself off mute. You're on live.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much for your time again. So I'm not so much as Shane, as in, I get that, before we start getting excited about drill, we've got to get the actual, sign in. We've got to actually get them on board. But I guess what I don't, Ian, understand is that as much as I appreciate you as a CEO of the company and so on, I guess for myself as someone that, represents holders in this share, because I am in the financial services and I do have clients that I've actually put into this holding. I guess I'm asking a question on behalf of them as well. I understand when you say that you can't say that they're involved and they're in and whatever. But the thing is, when you go and preach, or not preach, I shouldn't say that. Sorry, that's a rude word. When you go and try and raise funds with sophisticated investors, you're not going to say, well, I don't understand what's happening in this share. I don't know anything about what they're thinking. I mean, what are you actually saying to them? What's getting them excited that they want to actually raise money in your shareholding? Because that's what I'm here for. I mean, I'm here to make my own money in my own self-managed super fund and all that sort of thing. What are you getting them excited about that you can't share with us?
Not entirely sure I fully understand the question, Robert.
Well, you're saying that you can't give us much. You're saying that you can't really tell us too much because the AVO and all that, it might breach your... what I'm saying is you're not paid. You're not the host of Jeopardy. It's not a true or false question. You actually have some sort of a determination of what is happening and what is not happening. I get that you can't give too much away, but if you were to go to a sophisticated shareholder and tell them why they want to invest in this company, you're going to give them more than you're going to give the normal shareholder. What gets us excited about holding in this company?
We're not we wouldn't go and speak to any potential investor, sophisticated or otherwise, and give information that is not already out in the market. We're not looking to, and I don't know if your question relates to potential fundraising, but there's no placement, there's no capital raising anticipated, so we don't have those conversations anyway.
No, the question is purely, I mean, if I could totally dumb it down, it's purely like, what is a new shareholder going to be excited about in investing in this company then? I mean,
Yeah,
if you
okay.
can't give anything away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so the question is really, what can we tell people that makes them go and buy the stock today?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I mean, we can't come out. We're in a position where we can't come out with new news in a terribly consistent way, and we've discussed that. I think you just look at the potential, look at the size of the discoveries in the basin, where we're sat. Well, it's probably not what you want to hear, but we're on trend.
No, but why is the stock going down then? Why?
We touched on that. I mean, there have been a number of, I think when you get into these periods where you do have a limited ability to put out new news, inevitably some shareholders may decide, okay, that they may get suspicious and think, well, this is not going to work out. They may decide to stop. I think we saw a couple of relatively large shareholdings move on over the last 2-3 weeks, and that causes a bit of a snowball effect. A bit of volume, breeds fear and doubt. Nothing's changed.
What are you doing to help it? Because so far this hasn't helped it. What else are you going to do?
Well, we're not going to react in a knee-jerk way to rush out announcements or news in response to.
Are you going to invest any of your own money in this?
I've already invested.
Are you going to do more now that it's such a good deal?
I don't plan to put any more in, but I have invested fairly significant.
Excellent. So have I. I agree.
Oh, good. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Anne. Now, we've got a couple more questions with the written questions. Firstly, in terms of the 3D results, pure and simple, how do you feel about those 3D results? And how are those discussions with Woodside going regarding their interpretation as well?
As I've touched on, we do from time to time, under the agreement, there needs to be Woodside's obliged to share its interpretation and analysis. It doesn't do that on a daily basis. We have periodic workshops, and I guess we have broad consensus, I would say, in terms of what the variety of plays that we're seeing within the permit, within the data, and those that we think are probably the areas for focus. So, particularly for Pancon, it's intra-Saturn leads and the Venus analog, or potential analog that we see. Probably can't say any more than that, until we've had a bit more of an update from Woodside as to where they're at post their AVO analysis. A lot of this hinges on the AVO work.
Thanks, Sam. We've got Aaron Norman, who's just put his hand up. Aaron, the floor is yours. Take yourself off mute, and you're live.
G'day, Ian, mate. How are you? Just one question, Ari, the AVO analysis. Is there a specific time frame for the interpretation? Now it's with an independent body. Do you have any specific time frames when you can expect any definitive answers back, i.e., correction, RE, the AVO analysis?
Between weeks and months, but not 6 months, not 4 months. It's one of those things that's a little bit iterative, a bit like the interpretation in general, in that given the complexity and the subtlety of the features we're looking for, you almost don't know when you're going to finish until you get to that point. And you say, okay, well, we've done everything we can to de-risk this prospect or lead. Part of the AVO work will be a modeling exercise where you essentially characterize a particular trap of a certain thickness and the porosity and fluid content, and you model the seismic response and see how that compares with what we're actually seeing in real life in the data. Now, that is quite iterative. So it's hard to say that it's going to finish on any particular day. But it should be done within sort of 6 to 8 weeks from now, I would have thought. I would warn that doesn't mean that necessarily there's going to be the next day an announcement that says here's the AVO analysis and results. That's just the AVO is just going to feed into the characterization of the leads and eventually prospects and into the risking process. Is that
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Can it be, is it just going to be one report, or can it be progressive from the company to Pancon so that those, so that that information can be passed to the market on a progressive basis? Or will it just be a formalized singular report that you'll report to the market?
We will get interim updates from the consultancy. We're doing their first review right now, actually, but we expect to hear about that next week. But yeah, I would caution, it's not something that we can suddenly come out and announce. We have to be responsible in terms of what we do put to the market. And until interpretation is complete, we really, we shouldn't come out with any additional detail. Well, yeah, conscious of the fact we have, the market is desperately seeking sort of more color around the prospectivity we're seeing. And, we will put out what we can when we can. And it's something I think about almost every day. Like, okay, well, when are we going to have something that we can put out there? We're just in this period where we really have to do the work.
Okay. One last question for you, mate. It is rhetorical. Are you still encouraged with what you are seeing?
Yes, I am.
Okay. No worries. Thank you very much for your time, mate.
Yes, thanks, Aaron.
So, Ian, we'll just have one more question before we finish off today. What catalysts for share price growth do you see in the next 6 months?
Yeah, look, there are the obvious internal ones, which are, a Woodside decision, hopefully an early exercise of the option in a farm-in, with an associated announcement of rig contracting and an estimated spud date for the well. In parallel with that would be, of course, details around the leads and how they mature into prospects, and hopefully, in the end, certainly in the next 6 months, detail around what prospects we see, that Pancon sees, and assuming Woodside farms in, we need to make sure we corroborate that, and we're on the same page around the prospects that we present to the market. So those are kind of the internal things, which are major catalysts. Saying externally, there is a bit of a hiatus right now in the Namibian Orange Basin around drilling. It's been pretty crazy for 2.5 years. Drilling operations pretty much ceased, but will resume certainly in Q4 of 24, with Chevron coming into our southwest to drill at least one well. We've got Galp returning to their Mopani discovery, the giant Mopani discovery, to drill initially some appraisal wells, and then we think some exploration wells. Rhino Resources have farmed out to BP and ENI. They're going to be drilling a couple of wells down to our southeast. So a resurgence of activity within the basin, and hopefully continued success for all operators.
Thanks, Ian. To finish off, we'll go back to the floor. Ian Thompson, your hand is up. Take yourself off mute, and the floor is yours. Ian Thompson.
Hi. Yes, I'm just wanted to ask: have you got any interest in pursuing PAL 37?
So, beg your pardon. What was the question? Sorry.
Well, you used to have the license PAL 37.
Oh, yeah.
Are you trying to get that reissued?
No, the company did have an interest in PAL 37. It farmed out many years ago to Tullow, drilled a well called Cormorant 1, which was not successful, and the joint venture relinquished that permit. It's not on our radar to go back into that. It's a shallower water setting. The real success that has happened over the last couple of years in Namibia has been in the deep water. It's all about the deep water for Namibia, and we're happy with where we're at PAL 37. 87. PAL 37. No, certainly, I think we know enough about it to know that it's probably not appropriate for Pancon to re-enter that permit.
No. Okay. One other thought is, do you think the fact that there is this auction, so to speak, for Mopani, and Woodside might be interested in it, do you think that might hold back the timing of their opt-in?
I don't think so. No, I think they would, Galp will have invited, I don't know how many companies, the rumors of sort of 10 or 12 very, very large companies looking at it, and that Petrobras is rumored to have made an offer already. Is Woodside one of those companies that's been into the data room? I don't know. If they have, they wouldn't be in a position they'd be able to tell me. So I don't think it's a very different kettle of fish, purchasing what would be multi-billion-dollar, probably a cash deal to purchase a large interest in contingent resources versus farming in to drill a well to hopefully prove up some contingent resources. I think they're quite different things. So I don't think the Galp process would necessarily cause any delay to Woodside's internal decision making.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian. And one last question from the floor. Kunal Agarwal, you've just raised your hand. Kunal, take yourself off mute. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hey, I have a few questions for you. So from the drilling perspective, you have to drill one well next year. Do you have a deadline on a firm date by which you need to drill that well?
Yeah, we are in a 2-year period now, which was an extension of the permit, which that 2-year ends late January 2026. So the commitment is for that period. The well needs to be drilled within that time. Potentially, there may be additional time if, for example, we were required to find another funding partner and we brought in another company, and that caused an associated delay with a farmer coming in, contracting a rig, and it was going to be a little bit later than that deadline. Then I would imagine that additional time will be provided as long as Namor and the ministry, or particularly the ministry, had comfort that the well is indeed going to be drilled. Hopefully that answers you.
Right. And do you have a sense of how long would that extension be? Let's say from Jan 2026, would that be on the 6 months, 1 year?
I wouldn't like to, probably would not be appropriate for me to speculate, but I think you probably have to demonstrate that you do indeed have a rig contracted and a firm spud date, I would imagine. But again, I'm kind of speculating that's how it might work.
Right. Just going back on Woodside, you mentioned that the 3D seismic permit has to be issued from Namor for you to extend the license to Woodside. Now, say a hypothetical scenario where Woodside chooses not to exercise the option right now with Pancon. The license obviously comes back to Pancon holding 75%. And say you're not able to find a partner at this point of time in the next 6, 12 months, 18 months, and the license itself goes back to Namor, 100%. Is there a risk that because Woodside already has the 3D with them, although they do not have the permit, that they could go solo, bid it again in the next round of bidding, and they could probably scoop up the entire 100%? And that might be a concern for Namor right now in terms of issuing the permit.
That's a good question. Difficult for me to comment. Let's not talk about Woodside. Let's talk about any company that has come in. Company A in a different permit has come in and invested significant funds, acquired data, and spent time looking at that data, and that permit has lapsed. Is that company necessarily going to be front and center for consideration for a renewal, for a new permit over that area? I'd be surprised. It's probably the best way I can answer that. Does that help?
Well, I'm just trying to understand, right? What could be Woodside's motivation here in terms of if they're trying to delay it? Yeah. So yeah, just trying to get a sense of. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I understand. Yeah, it would be very risky for Woodside just to sit on their hands and do nothing in the hope the permit falls away and they can then come and pick it up. I think that's probably all I should say on.
But you do have the exact same data sets that Woodside has.
Yes, absolutely.
So should Woodside choose not to exercise the option, you can open up the data room to share the exact same data with other partners or potential partners.
Absolutely, yes.
And there's no limit in terms of what you can and cannot share in that sense.
No, there's not.
All right, that helps.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Kunal. Thanks, Ian. Well, look, that's all the time we have today. Thank you all for joining me. And I'd also like to thank Ian for presenting and taking the time to answer some questions. Thank you all for the high level of questions. We were inundated with questions today, and apologies if we didn't manage to get to your question, but it shows the high level of engagement among Pancon's shareholders. A recording of the webinar will be on Pancon's website and social media platforms later today. And before I let you go, do you have any final comments to leave with us today?
No, just thank you everybody for your time, taking time out of your day to join us. Rest assured that we understand the need to keep the market informed, and we will do all we can when we can. And thanks for the questions, many of which were quite robust. So thank you for that.
No worries. Well, fantastic. That wraps it up for us here. Thanks everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Thank you all.